All rise. We will obey. The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'audience à la Cour pénale internationale est ouverte. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Thank you very much, and welcome back, everyone. Court officer, please, the case for the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. The situation in the Republic of Kenya, in the case of the prosecutor versus William Samuel Ruto and Joshua Arap Sang, ICC 0109-0111. We are in open session.
Thank you. Appearances, please.
Morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. For the prosecution this morning, Anton Steinberg, with me Lara Renton, Regina Weiss, Yulia Nuzban, and Yasmina Suljanovic for our case manager.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honours. My name is Arshan Narayan Sik. I'm appearing on behalf of Mr. Wilfred Indiretu, who is the legal representative of victims in this case. With me, Jairus Maria. Your Honours, we also would like to introduce you two new members of our team. These are pro bono members. With me, Ms. Amanda Wilmert, also with Ms. Charlotte Devina. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honours. Mr. Sang is present for the record, and representing him are Caroline Busman, Logan Hambrick, Hannah Lanham, Mary Ange, and Cynthia Bondi. Both Mary Ange and Cynthia Bondi are interns. My name is Katwa Kigan. Thank you, Your Honours.
Mr. President, Your Honours, good morning. Mr. Ruto, who is excused, is represented by Ms. Grace Sullivan, Mr. Andrew Mora, Mr. Essa Fal, Mr. David Hooper QC, Dato Shamla Alagendra, and myself, Kareem Khan.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, Your Honours, good morning. Good morning, everyone.
1 second, please. Mr. Emil Aoun, I note your presence on the record. Let's stop it at that for a minute. There's a reason why we'll proceed in that way. Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, before we proceed, there are some outstanding matters that the Chamber needs to deal with. We will need to go into private session for that. Private session, please.
All rise. We will lever. The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'audience de la Cour pénale internationale est ouverte. Please be seated. We s'assoit.
Thank you very much. Court officer, did you say you needed, for purposes of the transcript, to also put on record the case? All right, proceed.
Indeed, Mr. President, thank you. The situation in the Republic of Kenya, in the case of the prosecutor versus William Samuel Ruto and Joshua Arap Sang, ICC 0109-0111. We are in open session.
Thank you. You don't have to do the appearances thing again, counsel. But we're in open session. Mr. Khan?
Mr. President, Your Honours, I'm most grateful. Perhaps we could go into private session.
Private session, then.
Please be seated. Voivodeswa.
Thank you very much. We are in open session. Court officer, you said you have another announcement to make.
Thank you, Mr. President. The situation in the Republic of Kenya in the case of the prosecutor versus William Samuel Ruto and Joshua Arap Sang, ICC 0109-0111.
Thank you. The announcement is necessitated by the changes in transcripts. Let's go into private session for a minute.
We're in open session, Mr. President.
Thank you, and please administer the solemn declaration.
I solemnly declare that I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Witness 800. That is the designation under which you will testify, and I welcome you to the courtroom. As I have said to every other witness who has appeared before you, I also say to you, you're welcome to a courtroom that belongs to you, as it does to all the lawyers and judges who are now in the courtroom. Feel comfortable while you are with us and giving your testimony. What we require of you is to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, as you have solemnly declared to do. And you will be doing that to questions that the lawyers would be asking of you. And it is through questions that the lawyers do their work in our quest for the truth. The questions will begin with the prosecutor, who would ask you questions in examination in chief. When the prosecutor completes his questions in examination in chief, there will be cross-examinations done by the counsel for the defense, Mr. Kigen Katwa, who represents Mr. Sang, and Ms. Alexandra, who represents Mr. Ruto, will all take turns cross-examining you. And again, questions all the way. And your job is to listen carefully to each question asked of you. Concentrate on one question at a time, make sure you understand it, and then answer that question to the point and briefly, to the best of your ability, and stop and wait for the next question. Listen carefully, understand the question, and answer it briefly to the best of your ability and stop and wait for the next question. Do not trouble yourself too much with whether or not the question has been fair or is fair, or whether the question has a point to it. Just listen, understand it, and answer the question as and give the answer as the question requires. It is for the judges to trouble themselves with the fairness of the question as well as the point of it. It is a job we take very seriously. It is our duty to ensure that witnesses who come here to testify are not treated unfairly because they're sitting down in court and taking questions from the lawyers. We ensure that that does not happen, and it does not happen in this courtroom. In answering your question, you must do your best to eliminate guesswork. Try not to do the mathematics of the matter. So you put 2 and 2 together and then you give what you think is the resulting answer. No, just give us the raw material and let the lawyers worry about whether or not all that adds up at the end of the day. I also need to tell you that we're more interested in what you perceived yourself directly, what you saw with your own eyes, what you heard with your own ears as concerns the facts, not necessarily what somebody else told you about the facts and you came to tell us what you heard through somebody else. It may be from time to time that such information about what you heard may be important, but not always the case. So try your best to give us information about what you yourself perceived on a first-hand basis. The request has been made and the request granted to give you protective measures, and that's why we are using, for instance, the pseudonym 800 instead of your real name. That is part of the protective measures that the chamber has granted. So your pseudonym is being used and not your real name, because we do not want your identity disclosed to the public when you are testifying in public. Also, your image will not be broadcast to the public. Your voice also is not being directly broadcast. Distortions will be applied to both your image and your voice. From time to time, we will need to go into closed session to receive certain information that might identify who you are. And again, all those are measures the chamber has ordered in order to protect your identity, as well as the identity of people who are closely related to you, and again, close friends who are closely connected to you. Also, material that we would not want to testify to in the public session might be some unique information that that only a few people would have been connected to, including yourself. But there may be other people in the public who have learned that you are one of those very few people connected to that information. Information like that, we will also want you to give only in private session, because we want to avoid a situation where any of those people outside in the public who may relate that sort of information to you, we don't want them knowing or being in the position to try and figure out whether it was you who was testifying. So it's best to give that sort of information in the private session, outside the hearing of the public. And all this returns, it takes us back to what I told you about, to listen to the question carefully, make sure you understand it, and just answer that question that has been asked of you, as opposed to something else you're thinking about that might be relevant. The reason is, when lawyers ask you questions, they know of this need to protect your identity. So they will not be deliberately asking you questions that will reveal, that will call for you to give answers that will reveal your identity. So they are careful to avoid that. Now, it becomes important that you listen carefully to the question that's being asked and answer just that. Because if you do more and give an answer that the question does not directly call for, you may run the risk of injecting identifying information in the answer, because the lawyer didn't think you would give that kind of answer. You were just bringing out for them. So it's important to listen to the question carefully, answer it, and if you feel there's a need for you to add more, also think whether that more that you'll be adding may reveal your information. Then you can signal that, and we will go into private session to receive that sort of information. Do you understand all that I'm saying?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. There are some logistical matters you also need to keep in mind. There's a way we try to do our work in order to make it easy for members of the court who are helping put this whole thing, make it work, to make it easier for them. I'm talking here about the interpreters and the court reporters who can only hear you through the microphone. They're in sealed compartments. They cannot hear you directly. So it is only through the microphone that they can hear what you're saying and create the record for the court. So it is important at all times to respect the microphone in the sense of making sure that we don't have two people overlapping on the microphone, speaking at the same time. That results in crowding the microphone, and when that happens, the court reporters and interpreters will find it extremely difficult, sometimes impossible, to understand what is being said. So only one person should speak at any given time, and that brings us to the matter of how you answer questions. I noticed you are speaking in English, and it's more difficult. It's a good thing that you speak in the language that the lawyers are speaking, but the danger is that because you understand the question even before it is completed, you may start answering at that time. Then you create that overlapping situation we want to avoid. It's important for you to wait for the questioner to finish the question completely. Even though you may know the answer, do not take it away from them. Wait, they finish, then you pause for 5 seconds. When you're pausing for 5 seconds, you're freeing up the microphone and allowing interpretation of the question to finish. Within 5 seconds, that should be done. And then you start your answer after 5 seconds. The rule of thumb for 5 seconds is if you count in your mind silently up to 5, that will help us do that trick. It is also important for you to speak at a moderate pace, and not too fast, but also not too slowly, but just at a moderate pace, keeping in mind that there are people who are interpreting what you're saying and also recording it by stenography. Council has been put on standby to advise you in case matters of self-incrimination come up in the course of your testimony, Mr. Anil Aoun, who's sitting back there. That's the reason why he's in the courtroom. We understand that he has had meetings with you and giving you advice about what the chamber ruled on this morning, as well as perhaps later on he will meet further with you about any other matters that may arise after he had finished reviewing some materials that the prosecutor and the VWU have made available to him. We will leave it at that for now. Again, thank you for coming, and Mr. Steinberg will start his examination in chief.
May it please the Court, Your Honours. As a first matter, may I inform the Court that the PIS, as usual, contains a CV, curriculum vitae, with the personal details of the witness.
We are in public session.
I realise that, Your Honours. I'll be careful. I've consulted with my learned friends, and to the extent of the information that appears on the CV, they've informed me this is not in dispute. There were some additional items relating to the work performed or the work that this witness says he performed prior to and after the elections that are in dispute, and I will lead him on those in the normal way. But since we do have the PIS, I can at least start in public. I will shortly have to go into private to elicit some more details. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness.
Good afternoon.
May I inquire whether the court officer could provide the witness with a copy of the PIS form? Thank you, Madam. Mr. Witness, I advised you during the witness preparation session that we would be using a form which I described as the protected information sheet. This is that form, and contained on this form are certain details which the prosecution considers unsafe to mention in public session. It contains details of locations, certain names, as well as your personal details contained on the last page. And please ensure that whenever we are in public session and you need to refer to any of these persons or places or organizations, that you should refer to them by the number that appears on this sheet. In other words, location number 1, organization number 1, person number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand, Your Honor.
All right. I'd like to ask you to turn to the last page, which is headed CV Personal Information. It's page number 4. Do you have that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, I'd like you to read through this again. I know that we showed you this a similar page during the course of your preparation, but can you please read through this information and just confirm for the record that it is correct?
This is correct, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Your Honours, I do need to, as I said earlier, elicit some additional information, and may I ask that we go into private session for approximately 10 to 15 minutes.
We will go into private session, and Mr. Steinberg, it might be safer if you introduced the PIS formally when we move into the private session to avoid this business of us forgetting it as we've often done in the course of the proceedings, basically to tender it in at this stage, is what I'm saying. Private session.
We're in open session, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honour. Now, if I can just recap, Mr. Witness, we were dealing with a certain meeting which took place in the area of location number 9 on the PIS, a meeting which was attended by, amongst others, Mr. William Ruto, Mr. Lagat MP, Mr. David Koros MP, and Councillor Josiah Magut on the 1st of October 2005. Now, did any of these persons speak at that event?
Yes, Your Honor.
And who were they?
I remember the words of Honorable William Ruto.
And what were those words that you can recall? Sorry, before you answer that, let me start off by saying, in what language did Mr. Ruto address the persons gathered at that location?
Your Honor, Mr. Ruto spoke in Kiswahili, and then at some instant he switched to Kalenjin.
And while he was speaking in Kiswahili, is there anything that you can recall him saying?
Yes, Your Honor. He wanted people to vote against the Constitution, come in large numbers, and ensure they have the voting cards so that they could vote against the proposed Constitution.
Yes, anything else?
He wanted to make sure that he urged people to turn out in numbers, and also wanted them to continue, even going down to the grassroots, to those people who did not attend the meeting, to be told that they should actually turn in numbers to vote.
All right. Now, when Mr. Ruto switched into Kalenjin, what did he have to say then?
When Mr. Ruto turned to Kalenjin, in the midst of his speech. He was saying in Kalenjin that he was seeing the white mushrooms still in that area.
Yes, and what did he say about these white mushrooms?
That they should be uprooted or eaten.
Now, you've indicated on your CV that you speak, or you've indicated Kalenjin is one of the languages that you speak. What is the level of your Kalenjin competence?
Good, Your Honor.
And you've also told us that you've... No, I can't say that in public.
Let's get the answer to line 20. Did the witness say good?
That is what I heard, Your Honor. Did you say your Kalenjin understanding was good?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thanks.
All right. What did you understand Mr. Ruto to be referring to when he said, if I can just get the exact words, that he was seeing white mushrooms? What were these white mushrooms?
Your Honor, I understood it to mean the Kikuyu people, because some of them, even who had attended, they had the white scarves, which they put mostly around, they tie in their heads. These white scarves which are tied in their heads are mostly encouraged in Kikuyu community by their churches, because when you become a Christian and adore in their churches, you have to wear and you have to tie that white scarf on your head. So most Kikuyu people do tie that white scarf in their heads.
Thank you. And what did you understand him to mean when he said that these white mushrooms should be uprooted or eaten?
I understood when he said that to mean that the Kalenjin people should send away the Kikuyu.
Now, we know that this event took place in the lead up to the 2005 referendum. In that context, why would it be necessary to send away the Kikuyu people from that area?
Your Honor, the Kikuyu people were not sent away, or there was no mayhem after the referendum, because the no campaign did achieve.
All right. We understand the proponents of the no campaign were successful in that referendum, but that's not my question. My question is, why do you think Mr. Ruto was advocating for the removal of the Kikuyu people at that time?
By that time, the Kikuyu people were not voting in line with the Kalenjin people. And by that time, most Kalenjin people believed that the Kikuyu had taken up their lands and the economy, and now they wanted to use the constitution to take up the leadership.
Can you tell us, Mr. Witness, about the role of Mr. Ruto in the Rift Valley at that time? We're now talking in 2005. How did you see him as a personality in the Rift Valley?
Honorable Ruto, by that time, he was very vocal and speaking on behalf of the Kalenjins.
And how is it that Mr. Ruto was able to speak on behalf of the Kalenjin?
Your Honor, at some occasion, Mr. Ruto was given honor to become a spokesperson of the Kalenjin community.
And do you know exactly when that was?
I don't remember the exact date, Your Honor.
How many people attended this meeting that you've been describing?
Over 1,000, Your Honor.
And what was the reaction of the persons present to Mr. Ruto's comments regarding the mushrooms?
Your Honor, those who understood Mr. Ruto, especially the Kikuyu people who are able to grasp the meaning of what Mr. Ruto was speaking about, were not happy.
And what about the Kalenjin people present?
Most Kalenjin people were very happy with the words of Mr. Ruto and applauded him.
And why, from your knowledge of living in the Rift Valley, would the Kalenjin have been happy about, or were the Kalenjin people present happy about this expression?
Like I said, Your Honor, most Kalenjin people believe that the Kikuyu in Rift Valley have taken up their land, they have taken up the economy, and they are struggling to take up the leadership. So they were very happy to hear what Mr. Ruto was talking about, because to them it was liberation.
Now, I note the time, but before we wrap up, Mr. Witness, there's a correction I'd like to ask you to make, or rather a spelling I'd like you to ask us to help us with. on page 14, line 3, you referred to... Can I do this in public? I can't do it in public. Sorry, Your Honour, there's a correction to 2 locations there, but I can't do that in public. Perhaps I can come back to that tomorrow, or we can briefly go into private and I can deal with it now.
Let's go into private and get it over with.